Hey everyone, what's going on? My name is Mer. If we haven't met, I am so glad that you are here. I am from the Green Bay, Wisconsin area. Me and my husband, we've settled down in the central Wisconsin area. We are the parents of a beautiful daughter, Adelie Rose Winter, who we are madly in love with. We welcomed her into our family in August, actually on her due date, August 3rd of 2022. So it's been a really exciting, challenging time for us as we navigate parenthood. I thought it would be really fun to share with you guys John and I's story. I like to think that it was very unorthodox of how we met and really how we came to be parents and where we are today. And so I thought that it could be fun to relive all of the stuff from our past, the history, and to really have you guys come along this journey with us. And maybe it'll help you better understand both my husband and I and our relationship. So let's get right into it. So my husband, John, he is originally from Alexandria, Minnesota, and actually he is originally from Colombia. So my husband was adopted when he was about 5 years old to a family in Alexandria, Minnesota. His parents, they raised him within the church and really giving him that faith background. And so he went to a tech school in his area in Alexandria for graphic design. I think it was art and design is technically the major. And so he was in and out of school for I think 4 to 5 years, kind of figuring out what he wanted to do, if that's what he wanted to do. In the meantime, I was attending UW Stevens Point and going for my social work and sociology major. And so we both were involved with campus ministries on our campuses called Cru. Therefore, I had really gotten involved with Cru. I would say it was my freshman year spring semester, so 2016, spring of 2016, and went on a summer mission trip actually that summer to North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I really grew my faith, really grew my foundation. That's where I had met a friend I met quite a few friends, but there was one friend in specific who gave me the connection with John. Fast forward to the fall of 2016, there was this ethnic minority conference, one of the conferences that Cru puts on. It was the first day. My husband, who wasn't my husband at the time, who I had no idea who he was, walked through the doors with this friend who I just spent the whole summer with, and I was so excited to see her. And then this guy caught my eye, and I was like, who is he? He's really cute. And right away, as Mer always does, I asked him, what is your story? Was literally one of my first questions. Well, it was, what's your name? And tell me about yourself. Like, what's your story? He was a bit weirded out about that question. I don't think he provided me much information, which makes sense. Like, we've never met before, so I don't expect him to pour out his heart to me. We ended up getting each other's Snapchats, and we kind of left it at that. The whole weekend, there wasn't anything that really sparked, anything really came from it. And Cru had put on another conference towards the end of the fall semester. They do it going into the new year. It's called Winter Conference, Cru Winter Conference. And John ended up going to Cru Winter Conference. I ended up going. We were Snapchatting in between these conferences too, mind you. The first one was, I think, in October or November. So we had only been talking for a little bit. Anyways, we get to Cru Winter Conference and we had a couple interactions, but I kind of was just not as interested because I felt like John wasn't super interested in me and I wanted to feel pursued by somebody, and it just seemed like John wasn't ready to kind of settle down or to really pursue somebody. So I kind of stopped Snapchatting him. We stopped Snapchatting for a couple years actually, and just kind of cut ties, cut ends, nothing on bad terms or anything. It just kind of dwindled out. Well, fast forward to I believe it was the summer of 2018, and I had led a summer mission trip to Perth, Australia, and my husband, again, not my husband at the time, John, was in Medora, South Dakota for a summer mission trip. Now, I had gotten some pictures that I had seen online from Medora, South Dakota trip. I had some friends from my campus that had attended that trip. And then I had looked into the pictures and I'm like zooming. And I see that John's in those pictures. And something I should note, John wasn't super like walking out his faith, and I was new in my faith. So, we were kind of figuring things out, and that's kind of why it also didn't work in the beginning. We were both in different seasons of life. When I had seen him on this summer mission trip, I was kind of shocked. I messaged him right away on Facebook while on my summer mission trip, and I just said, hey, that's super awesome that you went to Medora, South Dakota. Would love to hear more about your trip, as I had went on quite a few different summer mission trips, but I knew that the stateside ones, that you really just grew in your faith and in a foundation in the Lord as you had weekly devotional times, daily devotional times, men's and women's times, different things like that. And so I just had a feeling that he had really grown, and I really just wanted to tap into that and really just hear from him, not trying to have any ultra motive of, really trying to get in there and, maybe we'll date. But really, I was just trying to encourage him because I just thought that was really cool. So we're messaging a little bit back and forth on our trip. He had responded back, and we're just kind of picking up conversation. I explained to him that I was on summer mission too. And yeah, we're kind of encouraging each other with what God was doing in and through our lives throughout that summer. We were sharing about that. And then also, what we were planning on looking forward to with the fall semester. So that kind of happened in August of 2019, that we kind of rekindled, retalked, and again, nothing crazy. There wasn't anything deeper than just a friendship and just two friends talking. Now we're in the fall semester. We are still messaging. We hadn't had each other's personal phone numbers. We were just messaging on Facebook. I believe we were also doing some Snapchatting, and then also just messaging on Instagram a little bit here and there. I kind of came to this point though with John where I again felt like, okay, something needs to happen. Either this needs to be solidified, or I can't continue to let my heart be invested in this. Because I eventually started to grow feelings for John, and I didn't know if he had feelings for me too. And quite honestly, I didn't want to get hurt and to know if he didn't like me or not. We were Snapchatting. We're about to hit like a really high streak. I can't remember what it was. And I remember just not replying back to him. I felt like he was maybe kind of leading me on without telling me his feelings. And at the time, I didn't really want to put all my eggs out there for him to then like crush them and shatter them. And so I ended up just stopped Snapchatting him, and then we just stopped messaging. Well, it was sometime in November that John posted a Instagram story about pineapple belonging on pizza. We're gonna pause. Do you think that pineapple belongs on pizza? This is like actually a really controversial thing, I guess. And I'm indifferent. I wouldn't necessarily ask for like a Hawaiian pizza, which is the Canadian bacon and pineapple, but I also wouldn't knock it either. I think it's pretty good. I'm not against it, but I'm also not like for it where I'm gonna like root it on. Anyhow, that's my personal opinion. Okay, getting back to the story. So John posts a poll about pineapple belonging on pizza. And I think at the time, and I don't know if I ever had pineapple on pizza at the time, so I think I put like no or whatever. He then DMs me and says like some type of message articulating that, I'm wrong or whatever. So then we start messaging again on Instagram, and he's a little bit more flirtier than he was before. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Maybe he's like, okay, ready to like kind of pursue me, like take these next steps with me and see where this goes. We're messaging for a couple more weeks, and it's flirty, nothing like inappropriate, but just where you're using emojis, and it's like, okay, smiley emoji, like I wouldn't just use the smiley emoji on anybody. It had then got to a point where I really did feel in my spirit that I needed to speak up and say something about what I'm feeling, where he's at, where do we see this going? Because again, I didn't just want to be mindlessly talking to this guy, having my feelings involved, and the possibility of getting hurt with this not going anywhere. I messaged him, And I just had said in our conversations, I think what I did actually is I said, do you want to play 21 questions? So we played 21 questions. I asked a question, he asked a question, and I eventually asked him a question. I think I said, what are your intentions with me? So if you're trying to get some information out on somebody and you want to do it in like kind of a chill, play 21 questions. I will say that I think it works. So anyhow, so I asked him, what are your intentions with me? And I think even before that question, we were talking about like if we were ready for relationships. And so when I had asked this question, it was kind of right after that. And he said, well, I think you're cute and I enjoy talking to you, and maybe some other things. And I kind of had then said, so would you ever consider like taking this a step further? I don't know, probably said something a little bit more cheesier. He had just said that he would love to take me on a date and kind of see from there. I'm gonna pause because I have to share this part of the story because it's so embarrassing. So John sends me these messages and I'm like messaging some of my close friends in a group chat. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like I just like sent this message to John and I'm like feeling so bold. Like please be praying that like this is a good outcome. Because too, outside of John and I even forming a relationship, we had become good friends where we did talk a lot, and you know, John confided in me about a few things, I confided in him about a few things. So I'm messaging my friends all of this of how like I'm like super anxious, yada yada. John sends me that message about how he thinks I'm cute and you know how he'd like to go on a date. So I screenshot the message and I send it. Here to find out, I sent it to John. I was freaking out. I was home at this time when we were messaging because it was winter break, so mid-December. And I was just screaming in my mom's basement or in the like living room, family room area, just freaking out. Like, oh my gosh, did I really just do this oopsie of like sending John this message? Like I could not believe it. So I like FaceTime my friends right away and I start freaking out. I'm like, you guys, like John sent this message and of course I screenshot it. I send it to him. Like he's gonna think I'm a weirdo. Like he's gonna think that like I'm like obsessed with him, which maybe I was a little bit, no, but I was just super excited. And so I was freaking out. It took John like a good minute or two. Like, I don't know if I just ignored that I sent it or if I think I might have said something because my friends were like, maybe just ignore it. I was like, no, I feel like I should say something. So I think I might have said like, whoops, didn't mean to screenshot and send that to you. And John, like in like the slyest of ways, messaged back and says, oh, it's okay. It's actually quite flattering. And so I was like, oh, like, you know, and later we had talked about it. And what he really meant by flattering is that, you know, the fact that I wanted to share that with my friends and not so much so keeping this a secret of just like, oh, he likes me and I don't really want to tell anybody. Like he thought that that was kind of cool that I was letting people in and really getting other people's opinions and stuff like that too. So to him, it was like, wow, like she's not like afraid of me or doesn't want to like, isn't like keeping me a secret. So that was kind of cool. But anyhow, I'm glad he took it that way and not that I was like this creep. So, and because it's not like I was screenshotting all of our messages, like that was not the case, but just like this specific message, I'm like, I gotta show the girls. I could not believe it. After all of that kind of dwindled out and, you know, we decided that we wanted to go on a date, we had decided that we were going to do that date during the Crew Winter Conference, which again, falls on the same time every year. So it was like December 26th through January 1st going into 2019. We decided that, yeah, we were going to do a date during Crew Winter Conference because we both were going and going to be attending. We decided to also FaceTime before we went to Crew Winter Conference, and it had been a few years since we've really seen each other or really had a conversation, as all of our conversation was happening virtually and over Instagram or over Snapchat. We never really sent videos to each other or again talked on the phone. It was just all kind of over messaging. We start FaceTiming and, you know, obviously you get the butterflies, you get nervous. but it flowed really well. Conversation went really well. We had a lot of fun talking to each other. And, you know, I felt like a little kindergartner, just like, oh my goodness, a little crush, you know, and, you know, he actually like kind of likes me back, and, you know, we'll see what happens. And it was just like this really like surreal moment for me of just like, wow, like a boy, a guy, a man who I like and value also likes and values me. After the FaceTimes, it was a few more days until Crewner Conference. We were messaging in between those FaceTimes and going to Crewner Conference. I think we might have done a couple more night calls. And Crewner Conference happens, we go, we like see each other, I think, right away in the beginning, and I was a bit intimidated and kind of like shied away and wasn't sure what to do. Also, mind you, I knew a lot of people at Crewner Conference because of the trips that I had went on, and a lot of those mission trips that I had went on, a lot of those students and friends were at this big event, at this big conference. So there was a little bit of like, oh my goodness, like, okay, it's one thing, it's like John and I's opinions, but like, what about the opinions of like everyone else? And I really got caught up in those opinions. We decided to go on a date, like I think it was a couple mornings in, and it wasn't great. The Skywalk was closed, so we stayed in like the Hilton in Minneapolis. And for the conference, everyone did, and we stayed on the floors with our schools. And there's a big skywalk that you could access the buildings outside, as it was freezing outside. And I hadn't brought my jacket, so when John and I met up to go to the skywalk was closed, everything was closed. And we're like, are you kidding me? There was a Starbucks in the Hilton, so we decided to go to the Starbucks, and then we sat in like the lounge area within the hotel. Again, mind you, there's students that are walking past us, that are seeing us, some friends that I know. And it's just like one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, what is everyone thinking? Like, this is so awkward. And I just really got caught up in what other people were thinking about us. So that whole conversation honestly went nowhere. We really didn't have much to talk about. We had spent the last few nights just FaceTiming and talking about literally everything, which probably wasn't ideal, as then we really had nothing to talk about as we were sitting by each other, and it just was a really awkward time. We left that. I went up to hang out with some friends, some guy friends and some girlfriends, but really was latching on to the opinions of my guy friends and really just wanting to feel loved and appreciated by them in a way that I was putting that above John. And so I ended up really taking to heart that maybe John and I weren't meant to be, and maybe because he's so awkward, John is also shorter than me, so I was kind of getting caught up in that as well, and just really putting that over John too, that I don't know, I decided that this probably isn't going to work out. I messaged John. I didn't even have the decency to tell him in person, but I messaged him, and we still had a few nights left of Crewner Conference. So that night after our date, I had messaged and just said, I don't think this is going to work out. I'd love to be your friend, but I just don't think like a dating relationship thing is like meant for us. And he was kind of hurt. He messaged back and just kind of, was like, okay, like, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I ended up walking by him in the hallway, which this hotel is huge. So the fact that like I bumped into him was not a coincidence. And it had been right after we had ended things pretty much. And I just could see the hurt in his eyes. And I also just like felt really bad too about it all. I ended up just trying to like not look at him, not make eye contact, continued through the Crewner Conference, and I really felt this burden on my heart, like, ooh, like, I just feel like that wasn't the right decision. Like, I feel like I really took matters into my own hands and really listened to people's opinions, but like, what about God? Like, I haven't really brought God into this. I haven't really asked him, like, okay, Lord, like, what does this look like for John and I? I really just took it on my own to make that decision. We had went home that January 1st, the new year, and I'm going back to Stevens Point. He's going back to Alexandria. And the whole car ride, my stomach is turned upside down and I'm just feeling unsettled. I get home, I try to sleep as I had pulled an all-nighter going into the new year. I couldn't really sleep. I think I messaged John during the car ride and just kind of said, hey, like, I really hope you got a lot from the conference. And, I'm grateful for you as a friend, and said something like that. John never messaged me back, which is reasonable. He was hurt and I had pretty much ended things without really explaining or having a reasonable explanation, and did it over messenger, which I should have, again, had the decency to do it in person, but I just couldn't face him in that. He never messages me back. It's about 10 p.m. at night and I'm just not able to fall asleep. And so I eventually am like, I'm just like praying and like really bringing it to the Lord. And I just feel this peace to just message John and to really let him in on where I'm at and what I'm feeling and my emotions and my fears about being in a relationship. I had a lot of fears. There were relationships I was in the past that I had felt not loved, not cared for, not appreciated, or that I felt like I was being taken advantage of, or, these different things. And I just had this fear that with John, that maybe this wasn't meant to be, and maybe, I wasn't going to be appreciated. Maybe, he doesn't really like me for who I am, and, I'm taller than him. Like, is that okay? And I just was getting really insecure. So I messaged him and I just kind of let my heart out in this message. He then messages me back and says, why don't we FaceTime and we can kind of talk about it over FaceTime. And so the fact that he messaged me back, I was like, wow, like, okay, thank you, Lord. Like, this is another opportunity. We FaceTime for a few hours, and John kind of let me in on where he's at, some of his fears, some of his insecurities, and I let him in on where I was at and why I came to that decision, and really the influence that I had on that decision. And it was just a really good conversation. I think we even ended in prayer, and we decided that, why don't we take a week to really pray about this, to really give this to the Lord and see if this is something that he would have for us. I was going to Michigan to be with a close friend of mine, and I thought maybe that would be really good to help distract me, with also allowing me to really let them in and process, but to also give it to the Lord and to hear what the Lord has to say. So that's exactly what we did. We came out of that week stronger than ever, really just in our friendship and really in our connections with the Lord. And John decided to come up and visit me for a day without telling his parents, which I'm like, okay, great. That's gonna leave me looking bad. Like, he had told his parents that he was at a friend's house and ended up driving all the way to Wisconsin, 5.5 hour drive. And I'm like, you seriously didn't tell your parents? Like, my mom would kill me. But I wasn't sure what his relationship was with his parents. John is committed, drives to come see me, comes just for like a few hours and then leaves. And that's when I knew that he was committed and he was dedicated. Because any person who's willing to like drive to come see you, and only for the day, when it's like a total of 10 hours of driving, like, that's crazy. That's insane. And so, to me anyways, that happened. We kind of define our relationship a little bit leading into more of January, mid-January. John asked me if I would be his girlfriend. I said no, I would like for him to ask me in person. Well, joke's on me, he never ended up asking me in person. And I think later on in like January or February, I was like, so, like, what are we? And he was like, oh, well, I've been telling people you're my girlfriend. And I'm like, okay, like, so be it. And then we kind of joked because John was like, well, I did ask you. And I was like, yeah, but I told you to ask me in person. Literally my husband to a T. I love him so much and he's amazing and he is really intentional. And so it was just funny that is how our relationship kind of started. So we don't really have like a date. I think it was like January 21st, which is when we had FaceTime, that he had asked me if I would be his girlfriend. I guess is technically now what we've been saying is our start date. So January 21st of 2019. We go, oh gosh, a year and 3 months. Well, no, it was a year and 8 months, 7 months, a year and 7 months that we had went long distance in dating. Long distance is not for the weak, but I will say it did really help form a good relationship with us that was really rooted on the Lord. We really got to know each other during that time, as a lot of our time was spent over FaceTime or messaging or calling. And we really had to get good at communication with each other and talking through things. And when we were upset about something, or if we felt a certain way about something, we really had to be intentional with bringing it up if we wanted that relationship to flourish and to continue to be something that was good. John decides to then pop the question January 2nd of 2020, which I then said yes. We then marked the journey of us getting ready to get married. We had decided on August 15th of 2020 is when we wanted to start our wedding. Well, as everyone knows, in 2020, it was a bit chaotic. We had planned to go on a honeymoon to Italy, which did not happen, as literally the week before I was going to book our plane tickets, the border shut down. So it was a God thing that I didn't book those tickets, as we wouldn't have been able to go, or we would have been stuck in Italy, which I guess wouldn't have been the worst thing, but also like not ideal. And with COVID, I know for a lot of people, it was a really hard time. And it was hard, I think, in different aspects for myself and maybe for John too. But it was a huge blessing for our relationship, as we were able to then spend extended time together. So at this time, I had graduated in January. Well, I graduated in the fall of 2019. So January 2020 was when I was starting part-time at my church as the youth director, and then also full-time at a family care organization doing social work. John was still in school for that spring semester and was projected to graduate at the end of that spring semester. So John's schooling went online, all online, and my job was all virtual, all online, with not doing member visits at the time, and then also the youth nights met online as well too, via Zoom. So John and I were able to spend weeks on weeks with each other. He would come here, stay with some guy friends that I knew, or, I would go to him, and then, his parents had an extra bedroom where I would stay in and sleep in. And so it really was super nice, as we had got to spend this super extended time, especially as we're in the midst of planning for a wedding. So new obstacles, of course, as we're learning to be together in the same area, same proximity. It brought up a lot more challenges, a lot more conflict, a lot more struggles, and it again allowed us to kind of be able to refine what does this relationship look like for us, and how do we glorify God in the midst of this and these new challenges and these new struggles. Fast forward, we end up getting married on August 15th, 2020, which was an amazing day, surrounded by family. We ended up doing it outdoors, which was what our original plan was, and the day turned out to be beautiful. We did have some family that weren't able to make it due to some health concerns and with COVID. So that was kind of hard for us to kind of deal with and to walk through and to really figure out should we continue with this? What does this look like? We did have our wedding videotapes, which made that a lot easier for our family too that couldn't be there, so that way they still felt a part of our big day. So John and I get married. We end up settling here in Stevens Point. The place that we're in now actually is the place that we moved into when we had gotten married. So we've been here for about 2 years, going to be 3 years in August. We just really jumped into it. John got a job here in the area with doing arcade machines, building, designing arcade machines. I was continuing with my family care organization, the business that I was a part of called Inclusa. And then I ended up going full-time to Refuge in June of 2021. Celebrated our 1 year in 2021, August. Then Adelie came into the picture. Well, I got pregnant, and then that kind of brought a whole new dynamic with us and really sparked our love for each other too. I mean, it had only been a year, so we were still very much in our honeymoon stage, but it was really cool to see how our love grew in knowing that we were going to be starting a family. And so started a family, and here we are now. So that's John and I's story in a nutshell. We have come a very long way. We've grown a lot in our relationship, and we wouldn't have it any other way. I love John so much, and the man that he is, and how he encourages me, he spurs me on. John is almost like the complete opposite of me. I am an extrovert. John is more of an introvert. He is more to himself, but do not let him fool you. When he is really comfortable with the people that he's around and really feels loved and appreciated, he will let himself loose. He will let himself go. He can be one of the funniest people in the room, and can also be one of the loudest people in the room. He is just so much fun, and the life that we've created is so much fun. All right, that is John and I's story from beginning to end. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share this video to anyone who you think would be encouraged by this. I really do feel it in my heart to encourage and to share with you guys my experiences from being a mom to being in a relationship, married, to also my faith background and how that impacts me and in my story. So I will be sharing different videos throughout all these different categories of my life as you will continue to hear more. So thanks again, and I look forward to the next conversation we'll be having.